From rather foolish publicity stunts to just rubbing up top stars the wrong way. These are those exact moments wrestlers wreck their own careers in this business. So I'm Gareth from WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are those wrestlers who destroyed their careers in a single moment. Bronson Matthews. Imagine it's your first day in an administrative role for a finance company, if you will. Somebody higher up than you has obstructed a doorway that you want to walk through just chatting away to one of your colleagues. They didn't mean to get in your way, but you right now are annoyed. So annoyed in fact that you send out a company-wide email expressing exactly how irritated you are. You have annihilated your reputation, and because you're pretty much the most expendable person in the company at that moment in time, you're probably going to get fired. Now this isn't a real scenario because nobody would ever be that stupid, would they? Except in wrestling, where this essentially happened. Bronson Matthews won the 6th season of WWE Tough Enough, which was hardly going to kickstart his career and send him straight into the main event. But still, neither was burying the social outcasts as jobbers on Twitter. This apparently pissed off the likes of Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes and a few other people, and it got to the point where Matthews was eventually barred from the locker room because, well, yeah, that's kind of what you get. Yes, he did say that he was just tweeting in character, but still, just keep your fingers away from the Twitter machine. It's never a good idea, as you will see later on. Now, the 2016 incident didn't directly lead to his release, but it happened like a year before it, and his career was pretty much done as soon as he did that. Jackson Riker. Jackson Riker was nothing if not aggressively generic. A vacuum with a great physique. Sounds kind of familiar. But nobody has ever left a single one of his matches with the memory, really, just nothing. You remember that time he feuded with Elias? Yeah, probably not, but let me just catch you up on it. At that time, he played a babyface with apparent wartime PTSD, which was a pretty bleak development, and nobody really gave a damn about it. Nobody gave a damn because it was staggeringly mediocre, and because Riker's career was pretty much a zombified thing by 2021. He was doomed by his own doing to shamble through WWE because he was stupid and just ugly enough to put over Donald Trump amid protests over George Floyd's death in 2020. He knew exactly what he was doing, and so did the locker room that very much let him have it at the time, including Kevin Owens, who was disgusted that Riker even dared to try and get his catchphrase over at this moment in time. Forgotten no more has taken on a razor-sharp note of irony since Riker has only wrestled 5 times since leaving WWE. Jessica Havoc. Like I said before, don't tweet. There is no point, absolutely none. Or let's just be a bit more accurate, don't be a piece of crap. Jessica Havoc ruined her chances of ever making it in WWE when midway through a tryout that she felt was going kinda pretty well, people excavated old tweets of hers. And this was all according to a blog post. They ranged from spectacularly ill-advised to abhorrent in nature. While trying to get noticed on the independent, she absolutely buried WWE's Divas division, which, while fair, was again pretty stupid. Far more stupid and, well, awful was her decision to tweet out what she claims were ironic, racist jokes between friends. The "it was banter" excuse didn't really convince many people, and Havoc was consigned to virtual Impact Wrestling obscurity forevermore. Enzo Amore. Now, it was pretty unlikely that Enzo Amore was ever going to make his way back to WWE after he was released in 2018. He was fired after failing to inform WWE about a sexual assault allegation against him, and then he went and pursued a hip-hop career, as you do. Enzo wasn't a great wrestler, but that was never really his appeal, was it? He was a promo guy, and he was very good at it. But he was loathed by many of his peers because he was apparently quite an obnoxious guy who was absolutely in love with himself. Now, it was unlikely that he was ever going to go back to WWE after all of that, but it then became impossible after that strange publicity stunt that he pulled at Survivor Series 2018. Wearing Bart Simpson's Shelbyville wig and actually making it work, Enzo cut his signature promo before being forcibly ejected from the arena. Now, I've got a quick question for you. Was this the most awkward moment in wrestling history? I mean, it probably wasn't, but I want to know what you think is in the comment section down below. Tessa Blanchard. At her best and most motivated, Tessa Blanchard was outstanding before the likes of Rhea Ripley started lapping her. Incredibly physical, her power game was super legitimate, and she registered everything she did brilliantly. She exuded presence and was drenched in confidence. She also had the reputation. The reputation of being a complete and utter arrogant pain in the ass that nobody really liked. And this all allegedly cost her a job in WWE. With WWE, according to Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer, believing that she had a bit of a bad attitude when she attended a tryout many years ago. Simply put, wherever Tessa went, trouble usually followed. But she was consistently successful in Impact Wrestling, it's worth saying. On the eve of her big moment though, when she was set to dethrone Sami Callihan for the World Damn Championship, Chelsea Green and Allysin Kay, amongst others, accused Tessa variously of belittling her peers, and even spitting in a black performer's face and calling her a pretty vile racist slur. A series of callous behaviours cost Tessa her career, but the backlash came after one specific burst. Alex Riley. Alex Riley really had something, and in an alternate universe, he probably would have used it. Athletic and cocky, he learned the basic cookie-cutter WWE style rather quickly, and his achievement on Season 2 of NXT can be described as, with no hyperbole, towering. Everybody else on that show looked like a complete and utter geek when Matt Striker just asked them to talk about some random topics into the mic. Riley took it in his stride, baby. And then apparently he ran straight into John Cena, which, you know, can happen because the guy is invisible. Now, Riley may not be the most reliable of narrators, it's gotta be said, but former WWE wrestler Gabby Tuff claims that Cena tried to get Riley fired after Riley just refused to follow some of Cena's advice. Riley didn't do what was asked of him in a 6-person tag apparently, and from that moment on, this guy's name was Mud. Now again, it's worth saying that Tuff herself may have some motive to sully John Cena's name. Cena apparently told her to stop using the burning hammer after a botched attempt to do that move looked a bit too similar to the AA. But Riley's demotion was sudden even for the stop-start era of WWE booking. Dave Schultz. Dave Schultz had a nasty, intimidating aura, knew his way around a threat, and could go to the required standard. Not that that was of tremendous importance at the time though. Physiques and personality mattered more, and Schultz, a dark alley nightmare, had them both. As often happens, his flashpoint moment has now led to many romanticizing his career in hindsight. But he wasn't the heel Magnum TA, and had to work in Japan for a while afterwards, but the narrative that he was blackballed was not entirely a shoot. The WWF felt they simply could not use him. He resurfaced in Memphis and Stampede, but other promoters who weren't exactly going to respect the wishes of Vince McMahon in the 1980s still wanted nothing to do with him. A separate incident with Mr. T, whom Schultz saw as an outsider, was what ultimately led to his departure. Hulk Hogan may have embellished or changed his story in subsequent years, but more than one eyewitness believed Schultz to have posed a threat to T, and he was seen as a liability. His career was destroyed of his own doing ultimately. Austin Aries. Austin Aries was one of the best performers on the planet. In 2012, his matches flowed with the craftsmanship of some of the best ever. Everything he did he just nailed, and in general he was every bit as good as he felt he was. And the greatest man who ever lived shtick was no gimmick, ladies and gentlemen. The man's opinion of himself was higher than he was. Now that's not saying much, but you get what I mean. Aries was also infamous for rubbing people up the wrong way. Aries, who was often quite a nasty piece of work, managed to secure work time and time again because he was that damn gifted, sadly. People forget that now because he turned into something worse than a heel with his nonsense misinformation stuff in the pandemic, but he was genuinely fantastic for a time. He doesn't get any work, and he hasn't for years now. It is out of the question though, because he completely no-sold Johnny Impact at Bound for Glory 2018, and then just simply upped and left after the finish of the main event. If he and Johnny were in cahoots, apparently, Impact and them certainly were not. He claims it was a work, brother, but what money did it draw, and what the hell was the whole point of it? This marked the last occasion in which Aries worked for a promotion of any real renown, because in this moment, he proved himself to be a massive self-serving liability. And Ivelisse. Branded with the euphemistic difficult to work with tag early on in her career, AEW founder Tony Khan nonetheless took the risk. His women's division, already painfully thin, was decimated by the pandemic. The early idea to import experienced and exciting Joshi talent was rendered impossible due to travel issues, leaving a green crop of performers who were struggling to transition to national television wrestling. This wasn't their fault, they'd just come up in a women's independent wrestling scene that barely functioned as a feeder system. Tony Khan might be guilty of perpetuating the bleak cycle of women's wrestling in the US, but it's always existed, and all this gave Ivelisse a way in. Firstly, she could go, and without being blow away awesome, she could still work a snug and convincing style, and she had the experience to work TV-length matches without getting entirely lost. She was paired with Thunder Rosa on the 10th of September 2020 Dynamite, which was otherwise a bit of an all-timer. After more than a few stiff shots thrown in either direction, Ivelisse sat in a Thunder Rosa submission like a toddler that had just been told they have to give their dummy to Santa this year. Now, while it should be noted that the two did work together in a tag team match a couple of weeks later with no issue, in various media interviews after being dropped, Ivelisse alleged systemic mistreatment from the coaching staff. Blaming everybody but herself, once more, it's exceedingly unlikely that she'll work in the mainstream ever again.
You don't have to have ascended to the top to fall from grace. Anyone can do it. Fond memories can be tarnished by mistakes, and some things are enough to ruin your entire public perception. And if you are on the top when you fall, well, you're in for a long climb back into those good books. After all, the phrase, if you've done something right, then nobody will know you've done anything at all comes to mind. If you've done something wrong, people will be sure to let you know about it every chance they get. I'm Cy for WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 wrestlers who ruined their own legacy. Number 10. 10. John Bradshaw Layfield. Despite popularity as a member of the Acolytes, John Layfield's true renaissance came in 2004 when his character unexpectedly shifted completely into an egocentric, money-obsessed American patriot. It worked so well that he climbed the card to the WWE Championship. Many people remember JBL more though for his presence on WWE commentary for the better part of 10 years. Stories about Layfield working stiff have always been rumoured, but it was around 2017 that the allegations of bullying became much more vocal. Fans called for the man to be fired from TV, and many got sick of hearing him commentate after reading the accounts of his victims. Justin Roberts, the former WWE announcer, said in his autobiography that JBL had stolen his passport, and many ex-WWE stars also described Layfield as a bully. In April 2017, NXT announcer Mauro Ranallo left the company, and whilst he claimed it wasn't the case, many viewers felt the comments JBL had made on air about Mauro had affected the commentator's mental well-being. JBL was forced to make a statement claiming that he had pranked many stars, but that the WWE had addressed his actions years ago. In September of the same year, with the wrestling community sick of the sound of him, Layfield opted to leave the company to pursue other interests. Number 9. Perry Saturn. Many forget that during the late 90s, Perry Saturn was a valuable commodity. Starting off as an important part of ECW's early tag division, Saturn moved on to WCW and became a member of the severely underrated stable Raven's Flock. When the faction dissolved, he was the lead babyface of the story. In 2000, Saturn and some of his WCW friends jumped over to the WWF as part of the Radicals in one of the most talked about moments of the Monday Night War. A match taped for WWF Jacked was where it all started to go wrong. After being dropped on his head following a botched arm drag by jobber Mike Bell, Saturn flipped and legitimately started throwing punches at his opponent. The match became a fight, and Mike Bell was also dropped on his head during the ensuing scuffle. It's generally believed that Saturn's next gimmick change was punishment for these actions, and the star found himself playing a brain-damaged wrestler who fell in love with a mop. Saturn's hard work and commitment got the gimmick over, and so, as WWE do with those who organically get over, they killed off Moppy and ended the character sooner than perhaps they should have. With nothing left for him creatively, WWE booted Saturn in November 2002. If Saturn had kept his cool with Mike Bell, one has to wonder what could have been. Number 8. Abdullah the Butcher. Larry Shreve, better known as Abdullah the Butcher, made a name for himself being one of the most sadistic men in the pro wrestling industry. His extreme, no-holds-barred and obscenely bloody matches split opinion. Some were curious and some were disgusted, and this divide made Abdullah the stuff of legend. Abdullah had no issues blading himself into a bloody pulp, and more often than not did the same to his opponents, sometimes whether they wanted it or not. Always a controversial figure amongst both fans and peers, it was in 2012 though that Shreve was brought before a court and sued for damages to one of his former opponents, Hannibal Devon Nicholson. Nicholson claimed that in 2007 he'd participated in a match with Abdullah where he had been repeatedly cut open without his consent with a blade hidden on the butcher's finger. Most importantly, he claimed that the sharing of blood had caused him to contract hepatitis C. The knock-on effect of this diagnosis had caused the WWE contract that he had worked so hard for and finally earned in 2009 to be rescinded, and Hannibal was forced to retire from wrestling because of it. The court found Shreve guilty of negligence, assault and battery, and he was sued for $2.3 million. Number 7. Hannibal Devon Nicholson. Oh, that's awkward. Having wrestled only on smaller stages such as Stampede Wrestling, it was the dream of Devon Nicholson, as with many, to be hired by the WWE, a dream that was shattered by his interactions with Abdullah the Butcher. The wrestling community rallied around Devon's pursuit of justice until he won his court case. After he was cured of hepatitis, Hannibal returned to the ring in 2014, working for his own company, Great North Wrestling, as well as making appearances elsewhere. In December 2021, at a world-class pro wrestling event, a horrible incident occurred involving Nicholson and referee Lando Del Toro. Following his match with Carlito, Nicholson, as his character Blood Hunter, was booked to kayfabe attack the ref with a spike, who would then bleed, roll out of the ring, and leave. What happened instead was Nicholson knelt on Del Toro's back and repeatedly stabbed him with the spike, severing an artery and causing Del Toro to nearly pass out. Reports are mixed on the true version of the events that led up to and followed this. Nicholson made a statement of about 6 different excuses as to what went wrong, but others claimed he was unhinged, smelling like booze before the match, and even carried on his attack backstage. Either way, Nicholson shamefully retired from wrestling for a second time, and any goodwill he'd garnered with his previous struggles was tarnished forever. Number 6. Shawn Michaels. The Heartbreak Kid finished off his perfect career with a spectacular performance at WrestleMania 26 against The Undertaker. Following this, and the first of 2 Hall of Fame inductions, at WrestleMania 28, Michaels and Taker assisted Triple H to the back to end the show. A beautiful moment that, to many, truly showed the end of an era. Michaels managed to resist ruining this moment for oh so long, so fans were shocked and largely dismayed in late 2018 when HBK unexpectedly jumped from promoting a match between Triple H and The Undertaker to being physically involved. That lucrative Saudi Arabia deal had come knocking, and it demanded a Brothers of Destruction versus D-Generation X nostalgia match. At Crown Jewel that November, Michaels put in an awful performance in what was a no-win situation. The match was largely agreed to be an unwatchable mess that demonstrated what past your prime truly means. Kane's mask fell off, Triple H got injured, and Michaels looked understandably out of his depths. HBK has since said that he regrets coming out of retirement for, in his words, a glorified house show. At the time, Saudi Arabian WWE shows were largely inconsequential and considered non-canonical, but it doesn't change the fact that Michaels put the boots on, went to work, and ruined the sanctity of his previous retirement. Number 5. Enzo Amore. For a time, Enzo Amore and Big Cass were the most over thing on WWE TV. Quickly jumping from NXT to the main roster, Enzo's mic work instantly engaged the audience, and absolutely everyone in every arena was chanting along that being 7 foot tall was not something that one could teach. After breaking the tag team up, as is WWE's wont in this era, Enzo started a successful solo run that saw him get a hold of the Cruiserweight Championship. 3 months into his second reign, however, he was suddenly fired from the company. Allegations appeared that Enzo had sexually assaulted a woman in a hotel in Phoenix, Arizona. Amore found himself under investigation, which was hot water for the company, and they immediately took action. Whilst Enzo swore that he had no idea that such a thing existed, the WWE terminated his contract on the grounds that they were not informed of the investigation. Even though said investigation went cold due to insufficient evidence, Enzo's public perception was further ruined by the man's actions when he tried to make a scene in the crowd at Survivor Series 2018 by standing on his seat. Instead of patiently waiting to be forgiven, he tried to grab the spotlight out of Vince McMahon's hands. This saw him banned from WWE events for the future, and since then his independent bookings have been minimal at best. Number 4. Sunny. Tammy Sitch is an example of someone who is more well known for her struggles outside rather than her time within the wrestling industry. From 1992 to 2000, she bounced around various promotions, most noticeably the WWF for 3 years, positioned on screen as the beautiful blonde girl next door. Described by the company as the original diva, Sunny was meant to signify a change of roles for women within the company. Beautiful, but also smart and deadly. Behind the scenes, however, she was gathering a reputation for causing issues everywhere she went. She left the WWF after no-showing events and apparently becoming addicted to painkillers, and a feud in ECW was interrupted by her being arrested for violating a restraining order. Her lone year in WCW ended with her leaving the company surrounding rumours of drug abuse. In 2012, Sunny's path of destruction intensified with being arrested 5 times over the course of 4 weeks. For the next decade, she would routinely be a footnote on wrestling news sites, and it was terrible that it became normal to hear that she had yet again received a DUI. It would be impossible to list every legal issue that Sitch has been embroiled in, but the most important thing is that in March 2022, her drunken conduct behind the wheel took the life of a 75-year-old man in a parked vehicle. Sunny, at the time of writing, faces up to 26 years in prison. Number 3. Ric Flair. A lot of younger wrestling fans probably know Ric Flair as the man who assaults suit jackets, enthusiastically yells out a single syllable, and gets involved in awful pregnancy stories that thankfully never resolve. But for a time in the 1980s, Ric Flair represented the height of wrestling counterculture. Flair's 2008 retirement storyline, match with HBK, and subsequent farewell address were the stuff that any wrestler would dream of. Flair went out on his own terms in a match of the year winning bout and was lauded for it. 18 months later, he ruined it all by wrestling at an ROH show against Hulk Hogan. Most noticeably, Flair's ensuing stint in TNA was a blemish on his previous swan song that ended in a second, far less impactful, pun unintended, retirement against longtime rival Sting. Despite him vowing to never return to the ring after Jerry Lawler's terrifying on-air heart attack in 2012, here we are a whole decade later with Flair at 73 years old, gearing up for one last match on the independent scene. His original retirement seems a world away now, tarnished either by Flair's boredom or an unresolved need to prove himself. There is no way, no matter who the opponent is, that a geriatric Flair will be able to put on a good match this summer. Since his perfect retirement is gone, the most we can hope for is something safe. Number 2. Hulk Hogan. If you went back to the 1980s and told a wrestling fan that there would come a time that the immortal Hulk Hogan was so shamed that the WWE would ignore his existence, picture them trying to imagine what it was that he could do so wrong. Whatever you think of his twilight years in the ring, Hulk Hogan ruined his legacy via some pretty awful comments made in his personal life, a very personal part of his personal life. In 2015, a leaked sex tape hit the web recorded 8 years prior featuring the Hulkster, and this would be cause for alarm regardless. But Hogan's choice of bedroom conversation was bizarre and horrid, expressing his dissatisfaction that his daughter Brooke was dating a black man and admitting that, in his words, he was racist to a point. In the fallout, WWE removed all references to him from their website. His position as judge on the upcoming series of Tough Enough was revoked, and his merchandise and the WWE 2K15 DLC for the character was taken down from sale. 3 years later, WWE began to rebuild the bridge for Hogan's return to the company and their history, and he's since hosted WrestleMania and had his second Hall of Fame induction. The damage to his legacy, however, is still felt, garnering a feeling of unease whenever he's on WWE TV. Number 1. Chris Benoit. There almost certainly isn't a worse way to ruin your own legacy than this, and I want to state now that that is not meant to be a light-hearted jab. Chris Benoit's mental health issues that led to 2 murders and his own suicide absolutely rocked the sports world, and the effects of it are still felt to this day. Unlike Hogan, able to come back from his horrible displays of bigotry, Benoit remains the wrestling name that is the furthest from ever being mentioned again. In the 15 years since the incident, WWE has done their best to ignore the contributions of Chris Benoit, not just cutting around him in video packages that look back on great moments, but whilst content that features him was on the original version of the WWE network, it would often be preceded by a vague discretion message. With Peacock editing controversies out of WWE programming on their service, you have to imagine Benoit's name has come up in conversation. Your own personal opinion of it may vary. Some can separate the art from the artist and appreciate Chris's career highlights, culminating in a WWE Championship win at WrestleMania 20. Others, however, cannot bear to look back and celebrate a man who did what he did. Whatever you personally think, the WWE will never acknowledge Chris Benoit and his ruined legacy ever again.
So we have talked about this many a time before, but wrestlers are just human beings, and much like you and I, they have real emotions. Like, imagine you're in work and Dan from accounts turns up, and you hate Dan from accounts. On this day, you just want to punch him right in the face. Now, there's varying levels to this, but of course, if it ever does happen in the ring, fans just want to hear about it. Some of these incidents have become so historical, well, I think we should talk about that today. Sound good? Great. So my name is Simon from WhatCulture, and make sure you are sitting comfortably, because I'm about to throw 8 of these in your face right now. Number 8, Eddie Guerrero at One Night Stand 2005. Eddie Guerrero versus Chris Benoit was a match that Paul Heyman wanted to do all the way back in ECW. This was because he was trying to take the company to brand new heights, and because he always wanted to stay ahead of the curve, he tried to book it when these two and his other wannabe, Dean Malenko, all went inside with WCW, so the dream was dead. So when 2005 rolled around 20 years later, and all of a sudden he was allowed to book this pay-per-view One Night Stand, and he had Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero after the WWE banner, well, put your hands together, he's done it. While the timing worked for Heyman though, it did not work for Guerrero, because he had just turned heel when he was having that feud with Rey Mysterio. Because he was a bad guy, he was losing, and yet I checked, he was losing. Guerrero totally thought this would hurt his momentum, which I do understand, because when you do go bad guy in pro wrestling, if you don't get any victories, the fans will look at you and be like, well, that was a stupid decision, it didn't help you at all. This is when Eddie did what apparently Eddie would do when he did get mad, which got even worse, because when he went to the ring, he realized that none of the fans were paying attention, because they couldn't believe a bunch of the WWE roster were at ringside. So they were like, flub the fighting, let's just boo them. It all soon boiled over, because Guerrero very early on in this match also hurt his nose, and I think in that moment he decided, you know what, I don't want to play anymore, and I'm going home. It just meant that he put on a level of performance that was lower of the usual expectations, but again, if you didn't know this story and you'd watched it, you'd still be impressed, because that's how good Eddie Guerrero was. If you do train your eye though, you will see at certain points Chris Benoit being like, what are you doing, dude? We're meant to wrestle here. And by the end of the thing, you even see Eddie basically apologize to Chris, because deep down he knew. After the fact, they got into a big yelling contest as well, although apparently Eddie did apologize before he just left before the show was even over, because he just needed to get home. This is why Eddie Guerrero was so popular, because he was a real human being. It's like that story when he tried to fight Kurt Angle backstage. He went for a double leg, because Angle is an Olympic gold medalist, he took him down. Then later on, JBL was like, why did you try and do that to an Olympic gold medalist? Without missing a beat, Eddie said, "Because I'm a dumbass." This is why he would always be one of the greatest people ever. Number 7, the Dirt Bike Kid in the 1999 Michinoku Pro Masked Man Tournament. So a match between the Dirt Bike Kid and the Great Sasaki goes wrong in about 3 seconds. And if you do go and watch it, your brain will start saying, I don't think they remember that wrestling is predetermined. Now, if you don't know, old Dirt Bike was a mainstay of the British scene, and he got so much momentum behind him, he even had a few matches in ECW. Like, you have to go out of your way to find them, but it still went down. All of this eventually got him to Michinoku Pro, but as I said in the title, this was the Masked Man tournament, so you had to be wearing a mask. For some reason, Dirt Bike did not want to wear that hood. It meant when he was facing the Great Sasaki, he just took it off straight away, which was a terrible idea because 1, the Great Sasaki was the most popular guy in the promotion, and 2, he essentially ran the entire company and he was the booker. That's not the kind of guy you want to cross. It meant after a short exchange, the Great One got absolutely mad and he whammed Dirt Bike in the head and in the stomach. And while I'm exaggerating this a little bit, the first time I saw it, I was like, good grief, he's gonna kill it. Suzuki was then done with this, so he grabbed the Dirt Bike Kid in a front face lock and he squeezed his head so hard, he had to tap out, I suppose for real. And listen though, meant to time this, but I didn't because I'm an idiot. But I can guess, looking at my fake watch, it can't have gone longer than 2 minutes. Unsurprisingly, it also meant the British guy's Japanese dream was totally dead. Although after this, he tries to shake Suzuki's hand, which means he's not reading the room, because again, you can see this. I'm pretty sure the Great Suzuki was ready to box his ears off. After the fact too, Dirt Bike did a bunch of interviews where he ran down all of these people, but then still faxed them to say, man, I'd really like to come back someday. This is gonna totally shock and surprise you. But Michinoku Pro never ever replied. I wonder why. Number 6, Rick Steiner in Southeast Championship Wrestling. So we go back to 2005 for this one, which is kind of nuts, because these kind of stories were prevalent in the 80s, even though they shouldn't have been. I don't think they should have been happening after the turn of the millennium. The truth is, both Rick and Scott Steiner had a terrible reputation for just laying into guys, to the point if you did turn up at an arena and you saw that you were going to face them, so many wrestlers were like, man, I don't want to do this. They're going to kick my ass. I mean, there are a bunch of these too from the Michigan area, as they did build up this kind of reputation. And even in the early 2000s, notable names like Conan, Lash LaRue, and Hugh Morris were saying the same things. You don't want to work the Steiners, they don't know where the line is. Eventually this did lead Rick Steiner to Vordal Walker, who was an independent wrestler. And I can only tell you this, I don't think Ricky did his homework. Because after Steiner had booted him in the face and busted him open, Vordal was like, well, I'm actually a trained martial artist, so if you are going to do that, I'm just going to wrestle you to the ground and keep you there. That's exactly what he did. Now, during an interview after this as well, Vordal had admitted that he wasn't trying to be aggressive here. He was just trying to figure out what was going on. As far as he's concerned, Rick Steiner and him were meant to be working, and they were doing anything but. Eventually, Dustin Rhodes tagged in because he was one of the tag team partners, but it just kept getting worse. Because the match called for Steiner to powerbomb Vordal through out of the announce table, but understandably he was like, no, I'm not going to get up for that, because I don't know how gently you're going to put me down. Apparently afterwards too, Steiner completely ignored Walker, meaning he never got any answers. And then 2 years later, at a different show, there are reports that stated Rick left all bloodied up, because I actually think he tried to beat this guy up again. So here is a nice lesson, kids. Just don't be an asshole. And just to be nice to people, it'll make your life a lot easier. Number 5, Bruiser Brody in the NWA in 1986. Now, Bruiser Brody was known for his wild, out-of-control brawls that would go across the arena, and they got so much impact. Once again, the boys in the back were all like, I don't want to work this guy. I can't tell what the flub is happening. It just meant there was this idea that you never knew what he was going to do, which brings us to a cage match in the NWA in 1986, when old Brody was taking on Lex Luger. Now, you can tell early on that these two aren't on the same page, which is going to be a concurrent theme for this list. At one point, when Lex is trying to do his babyface shine, Brody is essentially no-selling everything. And then as he panics, Luger starts to punch Brody in the face, but once again, he's like, nah, man, I ain't doing nothing. Because Luger was so early on in his career here, he even goes to the referee and says, what am I meant to do? And after he tries one more time, well, Bruiser just grabs him and he locks in the front face lock. That's when you usually know a match has gone out of control. This did not look predetermined at all. Luger then decided he just wanted to get out of there, so he went over to the official and pushed him over, causing the disqualification. And yes, you should be rolling your eyes right now, because it's a cage match, and in a cage match, there should never be a DQ. Lex also basically runs away after this, because he didn't want to get into it anymore. And the Wrestling Observer's Dave Meltzer has always said that when Luger arrived at the building, he may have walked around saying, I don't want to lose tonight. And when Bruiser Brody heard about that, Well, put your hands together. It's only fair to say that Lex has weighed in on this too, and he tells a completely different tale, and that apparently Bruiser was just in a bad mood because he'd been stiffed by a promoter, so he lost it a little bit. But after the fact, these two were perfectly good friends. There's only one thing to do: write your answers on a postcard, or drop me what you think happened in the comment. Number 4, Koji Katao in 1991. We head to Japan and the SWS promotion for this one. And given the two people in the ring, well, I'm just going to tell you right off the bat, this is totally nuts. Because Koji Katao was taking on John Tenta, and you'll probably know him better as Earthquake in the WWF, or Shark in WCW, but go and listen to every single one of his peers talk about Jonathan. They all say the same thing: man, he was just a lovely, awesome dude. On the other side though, you did have Koji, who was notorious for not being very easy to work with, and in fact he'd been kicked out of promotions because he was always causing up a fuss. He still found his way into the Super World of Sports promotion on April 1st, 1991, and just ignore that date because it's not an April Fool, because halfway through this, even though John Tenta was a massive man, Koji was like, you know what, I'm going to try and beat you up for real. So we're here again. He also tried to take him down as John actually yelled at him, "What are you doing? This is a wrestling match." And I can only presume that Katao wasn't a fan of that, because he then tried to rip John's eyes out. So this guy is totally bonkers. The referee finally calms this down, but he just gets kicked in the stomach too. And that's when he's like, you know what, I'm calling this whole thing off. It's a no contest, mostly because you don't know what you're doing. I think Koji must have been offended by this because he would not stop. And he grabbed a microphone and shouted, yeah, wrestling is all fake. And if this was real, I would quite clearly kick this guy's butt. I mean, I'm sorry, but there's something seriously wrong here. Surprise, surprise, he got booted out of this company afterwards too. That's kind of the legacy that he did leave. You just never knew what the flubby was gonna do. Number 3, Mike Blackwell in the NWA. So this was in 1989, meaning we were about to hit that 90s period of wrestling. And people were still pulling things like this. I do mean this in the nicest way possible, but if it does happen and a star is involved, at least you can go, well, I suppose they have a bit of an ego and they're just trying to protect their spot. But when somebody does it, when they're just an enhancement guy, well, that doesn't make any sense at all. It's 2 + 2 = potato. This is what Mike Blackwell decided to do though, and good grief did he pick interesting victims. It was the flipping skyscrapers. This meant it was Dan Spivey and Sid Vicious, who were huge human beings, but hey, I guess it was the NWA Worldwide Wrestling Show, and Mike thought he had some kind of point to prove, and he totally failed. The whole point of the match is that Blackwell's team was going to get squashed, but Mike didn't agree with this, so even though he is being thrown around, he is being suplexed, he is being kicked in the face, he just keeps getting up again and up again and up again, like he's damn rocket. Even after the skyscrapers hit their powerbomb finish, you can see they actively have to hold him down, because Mike is still trying to kick out. So I think he may have lost his brain. Vicious and Spikey were so enraged afterwards too. They do a proper beatdown on this guy, and I tell you, just as Spikey is about to punch him in the face for real, they cut to the advert, because I think the people in production had realised what was happening. It won't surprise you that when they got to the backstage, this got even worse. So once again, if you have a job, just do your job. If you're an IT manager, you don't go in there and start doing cabaret. Ain't no one gonna care what you're doing anyway. Number 2, Yoshi Iko in Stardom. And this happened less than 10 years of me speaking to you right now. This did happen back in 2015 as actor Yasukawa and Yoshi Iko were fighting over the Stardom Championship. And these two didn't like each other, so I don't think either of them had the plan to actually wrestle. This was all out there. I mean, the reports have always been is that there was a sense of jealousy between the two because they each wanted to be the biggest star. But even then, I don't think we should have been doing this. As some sort of message though, Act does walk up to Yoshi and just whams her right in the face. And Yoshi is not into that at all, because she just comes back with these clubbing bros. And when she takes her down, you can see she's actually trying to rip her eye out, because when you go into the Wikipedia entries, that's right, before all this, Act had had massive surgery on her eye. None of this was good. And the referee does jump in after a few minutes because they can tell that something is wrong. And when you see Act's face, honestly, don't even go look. It's not worth it. It's a horrific sight to see. The totally baffling part is this match was allowed to continue. What are we doing? Surprise, surprise, seconds later, they were furious at each other again, and it ended with broken bones and broken orbital cheeks and just broken faces, to the point Act had to retire after this, and she never wrestled again. Yoshihiko was forced to quit too, but as is the way in wrestling, after about a year of being on the sidelines, she just made her big comeback. I don't like this. I don't like any of this. The whole point of wrestling is to protect your opponent and work in cahoots with them. Let's just move on. Number 1, Shawn Michaels versus Hulk Hogan. So this is the complete 180 about what we've just talked about, and it's only fair to say that Shawn Michaels has always stated, hey man, the way that I sold against Hulk Hogan is basically the way I sold for everybody in the mid to late 90s. Actually, if you do go back and watch a lot of his matches, especially when he was fighting Kevin Nash, he does make a pretty good point. Still though, when it does come to the SummerSlam in 2005, you could also say that he took this to another level, and I kind of agree with that too. Now I have to point out here that it does make the match so rewatchable and so entertaining, and maybe the Heartbreak Kid had a point here, because the plan on paper is that they were going to do 3 matches, and Hulk Hogan would win 1, and then Shawn Michaels would win 1, and then Hulkamania would withdraw for the 3rd one, when Hogan turned up one day and said, man, my knee's no good, I think we should just make this a one and done. I wonder why he did that. The real joy of this, though, is that unlike other things we've talked about today, Shawn didn't decide to hurt this man or actually try to beat him up for real. He just threw himself around the ring, no matter what Hulk was doing on offense. The best one is when Hogan takes his head and he slams it into Tina the Turnbuckle, and Shawn Michaels reacts as if he's been shot. Once again, I'm just going to tell you, right or wrong, it's very fun to watch. It also goes to show that not many people could actually do this, but Shawn Michaels was so good in the ring, well, you could probably have put him against a broom and he would have figured out a way to make it work. So seriously, if you have never seen this, get some popcorn and just be ready to enjoy yourself. It is laugh out loud hilarious. Plus, you can see Hogan getting really mad about this. This is the dark side of Simon Miller. It does make me tee-hee.
When a talent falls off or doesn't get over in the first place, this is usually the result of a combination of things. They might hit a ceiling. They might be good, but not good enough to reach the main event. They might have had their stuff at one point, but were stigmatized as just guys over time, never to be taken seriously. But sometimes a wrestler just completely destroys their careers all by themselves. So I am Gareth from WhatCulture Wrestling, and these are those devastating acts of self-sabotage that ruined wrestling careers. Number 10, Marty Jannetty literally rides into the sunset. When interviewed on his Dark Side of the Ring special, Marty Jannetty referred to himself as GAT, God's amusement toy. He believes, deflecting accountability entirely, that God himself interferes with his life as a rib. Did God tell Jannetty to steal a cop's bike and ride it into a fountain just for a laugh?
I command thee to pop the boys.
God wasn't to blame for Jannetty's constant self-destructive mess-ups, but things are always more complex. Jannetty endured a torrid upbringing. He also must hold the record for the most times Vince McMahon has fired and rehired a talent. And since he was never a huge star, that says a rather lot about how gifted Jannetty was. On his day, he was an outstanding babyface worker capable of making anybody look good. He was fired even before the most famous rockers run because they partied too hard and made a spectacle of himself. Then God got him suspended and fired variously for resisting arrest with force and possession of drugs, being in no condition to perform at the 1993 Royal Rumble, and ending in jail 1 week after reuniting with Shawn Michaels in 2005. If it weren't for that ruddy God, Marty would have been employed for about as long as anybody. Number 9, CM Punk detonates a pipe bomb in a room by himself. There was no reversing the events of Brawl Out. The Elite did not want to work with CM Punk. Still, as the lead man on a brand new primetime Saturday show, Punk was made, to such an extent that AEW Collision doubled as a psychiatric test of sorts. A more or less foolproof system was devised to pacify him. As was always the case, Punk was allowed near full creative control over the direction of his character. Every word he said was a word he wanted to say. He tagged with close friends FTR in several matches, some of which had no real storyline purpose, because he wanted to tag with his mates and was allowed to because he was the star, and effectively co-booker of the show. He held near complete dominion over Collision, and in the meantime the Elite re-signed and agreed to leave him to it. And then he banned certain people, even the head of talent relations, from appearing on it. He demanded certain things not happen on his show. He then stupidly buried Hangman Adam Page out of nowhere in an off-air promo too. He had everything and left himself with nothing. And that's before he stepped foot in London. Number 8, Ultimate Warrior's entire career. The self-destruction of the Ultimate Warrior Warrior was infamous because it was a phenomenally mean-spirited hatchet job. At the time, WWE had entered the DVD market and produced a series of glowing career retrospectives to basically monetize the legacies of its biggest stars after they could no longer draw money in the ring. The Warrior was an exception though. As you can probably infer from the title, WWE told the story of a lunatic flash in the pan whose incoherent rambling had dated horribly, was a reckless buffoon, and was such a crap-disturbing narcissist that over time he became unemployable. As nasty as it was, this was a case of you're not wrong Vince, you're just an a-hole. The Warrior did self-destruct. As the old saying goes, an irredeemable piece of crap is right twice a day, and Warrior was right to defend himself and demand the money he felt was owed to him at SummerSlam 1991. He self-destructed further when phoning in a run in 1996 that was bizarre even by his standards. He did make it back into the fold in 2014, just prior to his untimely passing, but a terrible 1998 WCW run lowered his stock to an unrecoverable extent, and his proto-alt-right BS on the college speaker circuit exposed him as a rancid human being who you can't believe you ever supported. Number 7, Austin Aries goes into business for himself. The greatest man who ever lived gimmick was no gimmick. Most great wrestlers beat themselves up when they work a phenomenal match even without an overt botch because they could have executed something more crisply. Austin Aries would smile and say, "Ha, no notes." In his defense, he was really great at his peak. He had a great mind for crafting an elegant, worthy main event match without ever compromising how exciting his stuff looked. He was also an abrasive a-hole to many of his colleagues and would even invade their personal space if they dared get his name wrong. He always received a strong push because he was so good, but he wasn't so good that he could go into business for himself and get away with it. He infamously no-sold Johnny Impact's finish at Bound for Glory 2018, and while he claims it was a worked shoot, look at his cage match record after the fact. Number 6, Buddy Landel couldn't exercise his demons in time. If you have a spare 4 minutes, go and watch this specific promo in the link on your screen. It's cut by Buddy Landel, the Great What If, ahead of a co-promoted show between the WWF and Smoky Mountain Wrestling, on which he was to challenge Shawn Michaels for the Intercontinental title. It's an expository glimpse into his life and career, or rather what it should have been. It's no sob story, and that's the beauty of it. He takes full accountability for his mistakes. He promises his hometown that he'll do everything to get it all back. He told that story because it was true. He was hired and fired by every promoter of renown in the land. His nickname in the business was No Show Budrow. He was so effortlessly brilliant that wrestling historian Bo James said when assisting Dave Meltzer with his obituary, he was so good and so natural at what he did that sometimes I think he got bored with it. He died aged just 53 in 2015. Number 5, Tessa Blanchard bullies and belittles countless female wrestlers. Tessa Blanchard had the world at her feet and literally, by all accounts, spat on its face. She had an in to the business, being the daughter of wrestling royalty Tully Blanchard, and she could not have broken through at a more opportune time. She debuted in 2014, just 1 year before WWE was pestered into giving a damn about women's wrestling. She was a precocious talent who turned heads with her distinct dynamic powerhouse game when the demand for high-end women's wrestling was stronger than ever in the North American market. The conditions could not be more favorable. Why then isn't she one of the biggest stars in wrestling? Because she alienated entire locker rooms with her entitlement and arrogance, was by several accounts impossible to deal with, and even, as Alison Kay alleged, spat in a black woman's face in Japan and called her the N-word. Yep, that'll do it. Number 4, Robbie McAllister literally crosses the line. WWE is an organization so baffling, with an internal code so slippery, that it has compelled many former talents to question their own sanity. You are meant to have a passion for and a sacred respect for the business. If you don't, get ready to learn the Undertaker's annual liquor store order, buddy. But don't be a mark for it. Love wrestling and dedicate your life to it, but don't enjoy it, a-hole. WWE has marketed itself as above wrestling, and by proxy every wrestling company to have ever existed. Really, since he has creative credit in shockingly few of the most successful WWE acts, that was Vince McMahon's biggest masterstroke. Robbie McAllister was an undercard tag team guy in WWE who made the very stupid decision to not just enjoy wrestling as a punter, a mark as WWE doubtlessly had it, but to do so at the competition. And then TNA only went and filmed his Impact Zone appearance. Robbie lost his WrestleMania payday as a result, but reckons he was subconsciously subconsciously trying to get fired. Number 3, Dave Schultz slaps himself. Because it makes for a better story, the Dark Side of the Ring episode covering the downfall of Dave Schultz portrayed him as the great lost worker of the 1980s, who was blackballed from the wrestling industry. Neither of these things are true. They're somewhat close to being true, but embellishment is part of wrestling. Schultz was a fantastic promo, intersecting menace and black comedy to tremendous effect. He was also mean, a quality so lacking in modern wrestling that it is romanticized through the lens of nostalgia. However, Schultz hasn't worked a match that stood the test of time, where many people still talk fondly about the best output from the 1980s. It's true that he was suspended by the New York State Athletic Commission for slapping John Stossel, but he was bounced out of the WWF for intimidating Mr. T backstage. T had done nothing wrong. Schultz simply could not abide an outsider in the inner sanctum, and went about it in an aggressive, unjustifiable way. In other words, Schultz well and truly self-destructed. Number 2, the Brit Rest scene. British wrestling really was big in the mid to late 2010s. Insane championship wrestling sold out arenas. WhatCulture Pro Wrestling, later Defiant, played a not remotely insignificant role in rehabilitating the careers of Cody Rhodes and Drew McIntyre. You are welcome. Progress, now that the worldwide scene isn't what it was in the wake of AEW's rise, was probably the last of the taste-making hipster independents. Brit Rest was booming, and WWE was so afraid of its rise that they created NXT UK when the rebooted World of Sport popped up on terrestrial telly. The rot set in when, at frankly pathetic contract offers, a lot of the best talent twerked in WWE's direction. Beyond a few overpraised UK takeover events, they might as well have joined MLW for all the exposure they got. The scene was also littered with creeps and abusers, many of whom were outed in 2020. Brit Rest never recovered after the pandemic, and that was for the best really. A lot of those careers can rest in the piss that William Regal drinks. Number 1, Hulk Hogan outs himself as a racist. Perhaps a better way of putting it is that Hulk Hogan ruined his legacy. Wrestling has a horrible way of rewarding bad people. Now, statistically, a lot of people involved in it are horrible people, which helps. Consider Ric Flair. In 2021, his awful behavior was brought back into the public consciousness upon the broadcast of the Plane Ride from Hell episode of Vice's Dark Side of the Ring series. Rightly, a lot of people stopped praising his impeccable in-ring legacy. But then, wrestling happened. Terry Funk passed away in August, and his 1989 series with Flair, which was incredible, was lovingly touched upon across social media. It's nobody's fault. This is just how things go. Hulk Hogan was outed as a despicable racist, never really showed contrition, and while WWE has tried to slot him back into the legendary ambassador role, it has mercifully never taken. The responses are always mixed, but the real love has faded forever. His basic work, stunningly effective and magical through the lens of a child, doesn't hold up. Does this strengthen people's resolve to never forget? Possibly. In any event, Hogan entirely by himself has destroyed his reputation.
We have all got an ego, and in fact you need a solid one if you do want to make it in wrestling. You've got to believe you're the hot shib if you want to get to the top, and many a performer has said exactly this. There is also a limit to this though, and if you lose sight of where your brain is at, well, you gonna screw yourself. So I am Simon from WhatCulture. Remember to always treat others how you want to be treated, and hit the subscribe button. And this is 10 times egos cost wrestlers everything. Number 10, Buff Bagwell throws his weight around. We shall start off by saying there's always two sides to every story, but these have all been backed up by multiple sources. Doesn't mean they're true, but sometimes there's no smoke without fire. So when the WWF bought out WCW in 2001, the big question was who is going to be brought into the company. One such star was Buff Bagwell, who lasted about 2 months. Yep. After a match so poorly received against Booker T on Raw, it scrapped all of Vince McMahon's World Championship Wrestling plans, Jim Ross of all people started getting phone calls from an upset Judy Bagwell, or Buff's mum. She had made her way down from a forklift and decided to tell the powers that be that she didn't like how her son was being treated, and this was a really stupid idea. You'd have to imagine this came from Buff, as he assumed he would be brought in as the man from day one, so when he wasn't happy. Apparently JR received a bunch of these too, and unsurprisingly got so fed up with it, just decided to let Bagwell go. And you can't blame him. What kind of way is this to conduct business when you've just started at a company? Whoops. Number 9, Jean-Pierre Lafitte says no. Sometimes you've just got to accept your lot. out. You may not have been selected to be the world champion, but that doesn't mean you can't make a difference. You still made it to the big time and you're on TV wrestling. That counts for something. I don't think Jean-Pierre Lafitte saw it that way in 1995. For you see, when he arrived for a house show in Canada and was told he'd been losing to Diesel, he said he wasn't gonna do it. Jean felt like his hometown crowd would riot if this happened, and when Shawn Michaels found out, ruh-roh. He told his friend not to go easy on this guy, and although the first match did end in a double countout, 24 hours later Lafitte was told he was getting pinned whether he liked it or not. Pierre still wasn't happy, so he was let go in November 1995, mostly because by then he had made an enemy of the Clique, and man, you did not want to do that in the mid-90s. No one won that war. Quite literally no one. Number 8, Dr. Death believes in Dr. Death. Ego may be a little strong with this one, but Dr. Death and WWE still dropped the ball with this. I mean, what were they thinking? Because when Steve Williams joined the World Wrestling Federation in 1998, he was likely on the back end of his run. That's fine because he could still go, and as he had a big fan in Jim Ross, a sizable push made sense. If it worked, he could go one-on-one with Steve Austin before moving on to something else. That's fine, yeah, cool. Instead, somebody decided that Dr. Death could definitely beat up everybody for real, so they threw him in the very legit Brawl for All tournament. I mean, they were just asking for it. It started badly because he took on our new favourite Jean-Pierre and scraped by, and then got absolutely wrecked by Bart Gunn. Now fair play to Bart, but he was being presented as nothing at the time, so when he KO'd Williams, that was that. Nobody was ever going to buy this guy against the Rattlesnake. So you'd have to assume the Doctor brought into his own hype, which he should have done, but not in a real fight. Even if you are better, it only ever takes one lucky punch, and this stopped his WWF run dead. So dumb. Number 7, the Dynamite Kid won't relent. It has been well documented that the Dynamite Kid wasn't hugely liked backstage during his 1980s WWF run. He would perform a lot of pranks and seemingly straight up bully some people, as he would often do in the ring. There is no denying, however, that he was a pioneer when it came to wrestling, but his decision to continue his hard-hitting and flying ways even after doctors told him wasn't the best plan was ultimately his undoing. Years on, he was wheelchair bound as he had given so much of himself to the sport, and you can kind of understand why he didn't want to slow down. He was getting rave reviews all over the place, and as a smaller guy in the land of the giants, had to do something in order to stand out. It really did do a number on him though, which was horrible to see, and you'd have to imagine while ego was pushing him forward, so was fear. What could he offer if it wasn't for this lightning quick style? A very tragic story. Dynamite would pass away in 2018. At only 60 years old. Number 6, Vince Russo runs wild. Vince Russo had some good ideas. You do not become Vince McMahon's right-hand man by accident, and he deserved his Attitude Era praise. The real problem was when he went to WCW and was allowed to go nuts in 2000. You can see this for yourself right now by watching it on the WWE Network, and seriously, he is out of control. Every episode of Nitro and Thunder was like a car wreck with stories making no sense, wrestlers jumping from heel to face on a whim, and no DQ matches that ended in a DQ. I am not kidding. It was a major reason TV ratings sank, and rather than realize what he was doing wasn't working, he just did it more, especially that nonsense at Bash at the Beach. I mean, we've already made a Judy Bagwell on a forklift joke in this video, and that was down to Russo, as was Viagra on a pole, and I still cannot believe any of this went down. If he had just allowed somebody else to steer him in a different direction, all of this could have been fine, but I tell ya, it most definitely was not. Number 5, Ted DiBiase lives the gimmick. In Ted DiBiase's 2009 book, he goes in when it comes to his career. He talks about his womanizing, drinking, and general behavior as the high-rolling $1 million man that almost cost him his marriage. In short, Ted actually started to think he was an untouchable rich top heel, and when his wife presented him with some not-so-nice facts, it hit him like a ton of bricks. He would be the first to admit that he had lost touch with the reality, and in 1993 this came to a head. Desperate to sort it, DiBiase walked away from the industry and basically quit full-time as he tried to rectify what he'd done. You can see how this would happen though. Vince McMahon wanted the audience to believe he was a millionaire, so would ply him with cash and make sure he was always seen living the life of luxury. That got in his head and poof, you are away with the fairies and you have no idea what reality is anymore. It is a genuine risk of being a wrestler. That line gets blurred. Number 4, China wants Stone Cold money. I throw this one into the shades of grey category too, because I think you can argue it. But after China had been through the personal ringer following the revelations that her beau Triple H had been seeing Stephanie McMahon behind her back, She was not happy because of course she wasn't. Who would be? She was but human. As her contract was coming due, as well as the fact she was a huge star, the real-life Joni Lawler asked Jim Ross for a bumper pay rise, one that Ross compared to Stone Cold money. There was no way Jim could sort that, as Austin at the time was breaking box office records, but did agree to try and increase her pay. Sadly, that wasn't good enough. Chyna felt like she was a pivotal part of the company, which she was, and if she didn't get what she felt she deserved, she would be done. It never happened, and the two walked away from each other. It's only fair to say there are plenty of stories that the ninth wonder of the world was also pitching to leave women's wrestling behind altogether and exclusively take on guys, which is also not an option. It's just such a shame given her contributions to the industry that the pair never worked together again. It really should have happened. Number 3, Bret Hart, Canadian hero. We all know the deal with the Montreal Screwjob and that Bret Hart got dealt a horrible hand. For the sake of balance though, some do take the side of Vince McMahon and friends because they believe no matter what, the Hitman should have done what the boss was asking for. He definitely didn't. The reason for the Hitman's decision are plentiful, and the major one seems to be the fact that Shawn Michaels looked Hart in the eye and said he would never lose to him, so why would Bret return the favor? So you have to say that ego was involved here, because how could it not be? If somebody is taking shots at you, you're gonna take some back. It's also fair to say Bret got in his own head a little bit about this, which is the old ego again, but I think with the power of hindsight, anybody could have understood his predicament. It had been a WWF roller coaster for a solid year where he didn't know whether he was coming or going. Really, it just would have been for the best if none of this had ever taken place. Number 2, the Ultimate Warrior is business. The amount of fallings out between the Ultimate Warrior and Vince McMahon is legendary. They could never get on for more than a few months when the Warrior would want more money or there'd be a disagreement about dates. It just did not work. When it was time to shake hands again in 1996, this got even more weird because the former Jim Hellwig wanted a comic book he created to be included in the deal. I mean, who has ever said that in a sentence? Plus, he wanted the WWF to sell them for him. The Ultimate One also felt like he was being screwed on merch payouts, and after he no-showed a bunch of events, he was out the door once more. As JR put it on his podcast, the man would just not meet anybody in the middle. It's why the Warriors' time in the promotion is relatively short, all things considered. They just fell out constantly. Number 1, Shane McMahon rebooks the Raw Rumble. So as ever, let's take this one with a pinch of salt, but look, whatever happened, it did cancel Shane McMahon's WrestleMania plans, so something went down, and it was not good. The word was that during the 2022 Raw Rumble, Shane McMahon tried to rebook the whole thing to benefit his own agenda. Okay then. He rubbed a lot of people the wrong way as he shunned other stories for his own benefit, and even him entering at number 28 was an error. This was meant to be Randy Orton's spot, who was reportedly in hysterics about this as he yelled at Shane to get out there because there was no way he was going to go to the ring to Here Comes the Money. Fans were also confused when McMahon outboxed former MMA fighter Matt Riddle, and he threw Kevin Owens out the match. There were even stories that said he wasn't overly cool about being eliminated by Brock Lesnar. What is going on? It certainly sounded like Shane-O wanted to win the thing, even though that would have ruined the man. The internet would have been after him, but I suppose if you are this far lost, you wouldn't care anyway. Soon after this, he was told to go home, and given that Vince McMahon on the Pat McAfee show said he was disappointed with some family members, well, none of this sounds very good at all.
Aura, that is the new word. We've also got cinema and live show charisma. Wrestling is not a real place. We are focusing on the first today, though, because in many ways it's more important than in-ring psychology. Fans love it. Given how rambunctious the industry can be, however, you're only one angle away from being told you are now aura-less, which isn't a thing, but hey, we gotta talk about something today, so I am Simon Miller. Let's go through 8 very specific examples. Number 8, Austin Aries. It is important to know that Austin Aries at one time was ahead of the curve. He was a must-see in many a promotion and could move from a wrist lock to a 450 no problem. He was a talented guy. Aries was also the TNA champion and nobody blinked an eye, and even when he was dueling with Neville in the Cruiserweight division, I mean, they weren't given the platform, but the feud was really good. Some of the matches were top draw. For some reason, though, in 2018, Austin got annoyed about something, I suppose, and went into, to use the classic term, business for himself. It was TNA's Bound for Glory show, and Aries was going to lose his championship to Johnny Impact thanks to Starship Pain. I mean, it was totally okay. At the time, a title change felt perfectly acceptable. Johnny got the 1, 2, 3, and the crowd reacted, so yeah, we were having a good old time when we weren't. For some reason, Aries instantly got back to his feet as if nothing had happened. He left the ring, and then he flipped off TNA executive Don Callis. What? Now, of course, some people have claimed this was a work that went awry, whereas others are just like, nope, Aries threw a tantrum, I guess. Only those involved know, but you've got to look at it from both sides. If this was story-based, why did anybody agree? After WCW pulled this nonsense in 2000, we all knew how stupid it was. Don't do it again. And if this was Aries deciding to ignore the art of wrestling, well, it caused a right stinking sort of stole away all the good work he had done. That's not what you want. Everybody just wanted to talk about this. Number 7, Seth Rollins. I think this one is slightly unfair. When WWE was going through a rough time in 2019, they were blessed to have Seth Rollins. Aside from his work in the ring, Rollins defended the company to a fault. The WWE needed that. Some of the booking was awful. The tweet that set the internet wrestling community off was after the Battleground pay-per-view, and you don't remember that show. That's not your fault, because I'd mentioned it was such an odd time for WWE. Nothing felt like it mattered long term. Seth decided he would defend the cruiserweight match between Drew Gulak, Tony Nese, and Tozawa after online criticism, but that's not really what people were mad with. Again, it was just this constant lack of consistency. For example, elsewhere on this card, we also got Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn versus The New Day, and just as the former was starting to cook, they were broken up because of course they were, whereas Ricochet versus Samoa Joe had given it their all for their United States Championship bout, but that belt just didn't matter. It was horrible to see. It'd been reduced to a trinket. Rollins himself faced Baron Corbin, and again, the match was fine, but WWE were not being fair to Corbin here at all, so when Seth came out the other end so forceful, well, there was always going to be a backlash. Not for pay-per-view, it just wasn't a fun period. Of course, it's hit the ceiling when we got to that Hell in a Cell match with Bray Wyatt, but I do feel like Rollins was just trying to fly the flag. He was the guy and likely felt as if he was trying as hard as he could. I truly do understand this, but it wasn't the best move, and WWE overall, my gosh. Number 6, Ric Flair. This is going to happen with every wrestler if you go on too long. I can't begrudge it because who am I to tell someone when to retire? And also, no, I don't think it ruins somebody's legacy. It's like the Star Wars films. There are some stinkers, but that OG trilogy, you just can't touch it. It hit harder for Ric Flair just because, intentional or not, he did have the perfect retirement. The one more match and I'll go away forever stipulation in WWE from 2008 onwards wasn't the best booked, but when we got to the Shawn Michaels match at WrestleMania 24, well, it was excellent. We got the big Raw send-off too, and of course the Nature Boy had the itch again. I mean, he barely missed a year of action when he went on a Hulk Hogan Australian tour before going on a massive run in TNA. It was almost as if we'd made up him drawing a line on his career in our heads. Those Aussie shows didn't help either, as they did not light up the world. While he did have some good moments in TNA, fans don't forget, we're like elephants. We already knew he had given it up. His retirement match in 2022 also didn't help. Flair pretended to have a heart attack mid-match, and I mean, it's not the way to end a legendary career. Sometimes you do just have to walk away. Number 5, Sin Cara. Or maybe Mystico as you know him now. And if you need proof you can get your aura back, go and watch this guy in 2025. He's probably the most over person throughout Mexico. He is seen as a walking hero. Years prior to this, in 2011, Triple H saw the potential in the man too, and he made him his first big WWE signing. Presentation was mostly the same, but he did have a brand new name, Sin Cara. To give you a better idea of what they had landed, Mystico was helping CMLL sell out Arena Mexico all of the time, and that had a capacity of around about 16,500 fans. He was also voted the biggest box office draw in the Wrestling Observer Awards, and that was in 2006, and yes, at that time, John Cena was active. For whatever reason, this new character was doomed though, and that was from day dot. Sin Cara had a spectacular entrance where he was going to use a trampoline to bounce into the ring, but nope, it went wrong and he fell on his ass. Of course, anybody can get past that, but somebody must have had it in for this guy. All of his subsequent matches had some sort of error, and look, he's only human, but from a fan point of view, it was becoming a thing. This dude was meant to have come right out of a comic strip, and nobody was buying it. There were also rumors as well backstage that Mystico was acting too much like a star, even though he was a star. I mean, that's just wrestling politics for you. It really did fall from there until Mystico left the company, but as I've said, he did find his way again. That's a reminder, kids. You are never totally dead in the water. Number 4, Chris Jericho. I mean, you just can't get away from it. I do understand the internet chat is not the overall wrestling discussion. That doesn't mean we can dismiss it entirely. All walks of life have to be considered. The issue this group have decided on, though, is that the Chris Jericho vortex is a real thing, and anybody who gets trapped within it is doomed. I mean, that is quite damning. They point to the feud with Ricky Starks, which sort of triggered a heel turn when beforehand Ricky was becoming a mega babyface. and then there was the Adam Cole program. Not even I can argue that one. For whatever reason, it just did not click. Hook didn't really benefit either, and who knows about Sammy Guevara? I don't really understand what's happening with him. It led to Please Retire chants, and I've already made my thoughts clear on that. You're a long time gone. You should wrestle as long as you think you're able to. It is true, though, that some of these did affect Jericho's overall aura from a select audience, hence why this conversation is continuing right now. I don't think it affects his overall run in the industry, which has been all time. And look, we're still getting gems in recent memory. That Bandito match was great. I suppose the contrast comes in the fact there was a time when Chris Jericho could do no wrong. He was the forever guy, but you know the deal. You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Indeed. Number 3, Jeff Hardy. Here is another guy who has mad staying power. I mean, go and watch the Hardys return to NXT in 2025. People still love them. It comes after a lot of issues for Jeff Hardy, which have always held him back a little bit, and Jeff himself talked about this in an interview. If he had stuck to the straight and narrow path, his star level likely would have been 10 times what it was. And trust me, during his heyday, he was massive. 2011 was the first true low point, as Hardy was meant to be challenging Sting for the TNA title at Destination X. To this day, I've no idea who signed off on this, but Jeff was allowed to go to the ring even though he was clearly intoxicated. The man does not look well, and before the bell rings, then GM Eric Bischoff saunters out for no reason and secretly relays the new plan for the bout. Sting is going to pin this guy instantly, even if by force. The referee counts to 3 no matter what. It was awful. Sting himself was livid, as he had every right to be, and the fans were pissed too. I mean, of course they were. If you'd spent your money to see Sting versus Jeff Hardy, you wanted to see it. That was an iconic match on paper. This came off a string of similar stories, and we know what happened in AEW. It was just bad, and it did take away from the entity that was Jeff Hardy. Thankfully, he seems to have things back on track today, and that is what really matters. That's why fans are back by his side. Because really, there ain't ever going to be anybody else like him. Number 2, Jon Moxley. Is this one fair? I think it may be a little bit of recency bias. Let's get stuck in. Absolutely, the character of Dean Ambrose was killed in WWE when he turned heel on Seth Rollins and started to breathe through a gas mask. Unless you've seen this, you do not get how bad it is. No wonder he was desperate to leave WWE soon afterwards. He totally reconnected with the audience when he did debut for AEW in 2019, and let's have it right, he was a huge reason for that company's rise. Not only was it a little bit like All Elite Wrestling's Lex Luger WCW moment, but him being there just helped. Moxley was awesome. This continued for ages too, until we got to this most recent Death Rider story. The intentions were right, as John's idea was to resell the idea of the AEW World title being the be-all and end-all, while simultaneously pushing as many of the young guys as possible. That's why at one point Darby Allin was rumoured to be the dude to beat him. He was as OG as they come. As we know, that didn't happen, and eventually the whole angle got weird and messy, until nobody really knew what was happening. Mox took the brunt of this, as it felt like it was his pitch, and sure, the goodwill he had was knocked a bit. That's wrestling for you. You're only as good as your last show. Kidnapping the Rock and Roll Express didn't help, as AEW fans felt this was way too WWE, and as of me talking, it is still going on, although it does kind of feel like the company is getting ready to pivot. I will not take all of this and allow you to forget about what Mox did, though. You're allowed to have one swing and a miss. So while I personally don't really massively like the Death Rider story, it's still Jonathan Moxley, man. He is a very, very good wrestler. Number 1, Hulk Hogan. I mean, where do we even start? Of course, Hulk Hogan was one of the biggest wrestling stars ever, and without Hulkamania, who knows where the WWE would be? That is all true. That doesn't mean we can't make multiple statements, and as well as the above, Hulk is also a walking ball of controversy and seemingly not that good of a person. The first proper blow was the racism scandal that also featured Bubba the Love Sponge's wife, and some of the things Hogan said were abhorrent to say the least. What was even worse were the news reports that when getting ready to say sorry to the WWE locker room, he instead made it clear they're all celebrities, so be careful what you say and who can hear it. I mean, I wasn't there, but if that is true, that's not an apology. There's also so many other tales, all of which make you question the world, and it all led to the January 6th Raw debut on Netflix. For some reason, WWE decided to will Hogan out again, and yep, he was loudly booed. It's not really a surprise when you go through his recent history, and whatever Hulkamania once was, well, it's not now. Every 1980s heel who promised to kill this wave had finally succeeded, and all they had to do was let Hogan go Hogan.